In this video, I want to take a look at a game which I played against the same opponent as in my last couple of videos. And, well, here he played definitely better than the first game, but not as well as the second game. And, well, it's interesting because after I win a pawn, the evaluation goes up to almost +3, which tells you that some pawns are more important than other pawns, depending on the circumstances. And well, after that, the game pretty much ends rather quickly. So my opponent plays the center game, which I accepted, and I think it was the second or third tournament that I ever played in. I had an opponent play this line, and I lost that game. I was a much weaker player at the time. I didn't have a lot of experience, and here I think my opponent played Queen E3. It is one of the top, if not the most popular moves in this position. Queen C4 is also playable, but here my opponent played Queen D1, which I was very happy to see because that pretty much negates all of the advantage that white has. So yes, Queen E3, the top engine move. Queen D3, Queen C4 should be the third. But after this, I just feel like black should be better just because better development, the knight is out. And yes, you have this pawn, but it's not really gonna help white much. So bishop c5, which is not the best move. It's not a bad move, but it's not what the engine suggests. And well, here, because my opponent played Queen D1, I figured I could pretty much get away with playing just about any reasonable move. And my opponent played sensibly with knight f3. Here I played d6. I just don't want my opponent to go e5 at some point and just get more space and stop my knight from coming to the f6 square. The drawback to this move is that now the bishop can no longer come back to either defend the g-pawn or to e7 in order to say I play knight f6 and the bishop comes to g5, pinning the knight. So that is a drawback to this move. Bishop e2. Now here I figured that I was just very, very happy to see this move. It is too passive in my opinion to play bishop e2 with the white pieces. I think that, I mean, at this point I knew that I should be better objectively. So I just continued my development. Knight f6, attacking the pawn. Knight c3, defending. And because my opponent has wasted so much time with bringing back the queen, and now with the bishop just being too passive on the e2 square, I figured I can get away with playing something that I wouldn't play normally, which is this move, a6. The whole idea is, because I'm ahead in development, I don't want my opponent to go knight a4 and trade this knight for my bishop, which is very good on this diagonal, and that is not the arrow I wanted to draw. This diagonal, and well, as you will see later in the game, it's this bishop that actually wins me the game. So here my opponent castles, and I take time to do the same because I don't want my king to end up in the center of the board and end up losing the same way that I won the last game. A3. I think that this is just a bad move. And the reason I played this again is because my opponent gave me time to play this move, and I don't want the position to get simplified when I'm ahead in development. And well, maybe unless my opponent plans on playing a b4, I don't really see the point of playing a3. And b4, well, I'll just drop back with the bishop all the way to a7. So this is one of the benefits. Queen e7, just putting pressure on the pawn. Now bishop d3. So again, the queen went all the way back to d1, so that's a wasted tempo. The bishop went to e2, now comes to d3, so that's another tempo wasted. So again, the longer you let the engine analyze the position, the more it begins to like black. And again, another move which I normally would not play. Now the reason for this move is I don't want the bishop here. In some positions I would not care about the pin and just let the bishop stay there. In this position, however, because the bishop is on c5 and the pawn is here, I can't break the pin with the bishop. And if I move the queen to e6, well, if I hadn't played h6, then the knight can come to g5. So it's just a balancing act. The pros of playing h6, I believe, outweigh the potential risk of, say, this bishop coming to, well, you can't even go to e3 because I'll just trade, but of this bishop, say, coming to f4 and queen d2 and sacrificing on h6, which is a very real possibility, because if king h7, then there's e5 discovered check and this knight is dropping. So again, another very passive move. It's just not, I mean, I guess after 2 losses my opponent was feeling overly cautious, but that's really not the way to play. I mean, playing too aggressively or too passively, not a good idea. And here I'm just pinning the knight, and well, I do have a threat which you will see, rook e1, which, okay, the idea is pretty obvious. Push the pawn and threaten to take the knight, or if I move the knight, to take the pawn. Here I play knight e5. The reason I didn't play knight d4 is because, again, you have this idea of pushing the pawn. Now here it doesn't work because tactically this just loses for white. I can simply take the pawn, and well, if rook takes, I have this check, and g takes, I take the rook, This would have been pretty interesting. So I'm up an exchange. But these bishops do look a little bit scary. So I played 95 instead because, again, I didn't want my opponent to push the pawn. It's just the same idea, but I just feel like this was a bit safer, not to have to calculate as much. And here my opponent played pretty much the losing move, King h1, which does absolutely nothing. He wanted to get rid of the pin, I suppose, but I guess he forgot that I can just take the pawn, which is what I did. So it's just a pawn, but already it's plus or minus 2. It should be almost plus 3 for black. So the reason again is because my pieces are better than white's. I'm attacking the rook, which means I'm getting another extra tempo. So that's a lot of tempi that I've been getting since the beginning. I'm up a pawn, and this king is looking a lot safer than this king. And here my opponent playing knight d5, again trying to take advantage of the fact that my queen is on the same line as the rook, but I'm attacking the rook. So again, tactically it just doesn't work, which is why doing tactics improves your chess a lot more than pretty much anything else. And here, well, I just take the rook. Taking with the queen is a little bit better according to the engines, although if you're down material, putting the queen here might force a trade of queens at some point if the knight moves. So I could understand why my opponent took with the bishop instead. And after takes, my original idea back when I played 95 was to go bishop h3, but I thought that just keeping pressure on this pawn would be better. And not only am I up a pawn and an exchange, but this pawn is isolated and weak. This pawn is also isolated and weak, and my pawn structure is just pretty good. And, well, bishop g3, which I think it's a pretty decent move. Queen d3, just hitting the pawn, and here my opponent made pretty much the last mistake. King g2 I think is the only move. After this I can play rook e8. I mean, this is still winning for black, but what he did is he just blundered a piece. After bishop e2, I just attack the bishop, and there is no way to defend the bishop. I mean, if you move the bishop out of the way, then I just win the queen with the bishop takes on f3. So after this, you just lose a piece, and now I'm just up a rook and a pawn, and I'm basically up a queen. And well, after we trade queens, there is no hope of white ever getting a checkmating net around my king, so there's really no point in analyzing the rest of the game. Just take another pawn. And here could have played a g5 straight away according to the engines, but decided to just be a little bit patient, just not give my opponent any chances. And here my opponent blundered with bishop e3. And here my opponent finally resigned. So yeah, it's basically just the little advantages that you get that don't really seem to do much, and once you get enough of them, like I did, several tempi, you can use that to eventually win material, and well, after that it's just a matter of technique. Anyway, if you like the video, to give the video a thumbs up and share and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in the next video.